So I have received a request to do a video on the topic of the process involved with bringing an animal into your life for the first time. So the way that I am understanding this question is meaning someone who doesn't have experience with an animal or with a particular type of animal, wanting to bring them into their lives to look after them, to be their responsible human. So first of all, sometimes animals can be easy, really easy. Just make sure they have food and water and you spend some time with them and that's it. But sometimes they can be time consuming, expensive, challenging, difficult, etc., etc. So to give you an example, I've been around animals my entire life. It's something that I'm very used to. It's something that, I understand specific types of animals quite well and their behavior well. And a few years ago, I decided to get an iguana with my partner at the time. So he and I both got one. And from all the research we did, it seemed like it should be pretty manageable. It seemed like, okay, this is something that we can do. We can provide them with the life that they need. And well, it turned out that it wasn't that simple. We made some mistakes. We ended up having to separate them because they were fighting. We wanted to build a really nice big enclosure for them to have freedom and space and the ability to, be happy as they grew bigger, because the tanks that we bought for them originally would not be big enough. And that never got to a point of manifesting. So after a few months, we decided, okay, we can't actually give these guys the life that they need to be happy. So we started the process of finding someone who had experience with reptiles, with these types of reptiles, and had the equipment to properly look after them. We found someone who we were very happy with at the time, who had that experience and could give them good lives. So sometimes even when you do the research, you don't realize what something's going to be like until you actually practically do it, until you walk those steps. And sometimes you realize, okay, oopsie, this is actually not something that I can manage right now. Maybe in the future, but for right now, I can't do it. And sometimes it goes exactly as planned. So for someone who doesn't have experience with animals, who wants an animal, my first suggestion is start with something easy, something dead easy. Like, it doesn't matter what you do, it's very difficult to make something go wrong. Does something like that exist? Maybe not. But things to stay away from are high maintenance animals. You have certain breeds of dogs that are very high energy, that need a lot of exercise, they need a lot of attention, they need a lot of training even. And without you being able to give that to them, they can become quite destructive. They can do things like they can chew up furniture, dig up your garden, escape from the yard, things like that. They can even become aggressive if they don't get what they need. So stay away from high requirements, demanding types of breeds of animals. Generally, cats are quite easy. You got to make sure you feed them a decent food. Typically, the dry kibble is not so good for them because their bodies are quite sensitive to becoming dehydrated, and they generally don't drink enough water on their own. So a wet food is better for them. Make sure there's always fresh food, fresh water available. If they're being kept inside the house only, then you usually will have to restrict their food and feed them measured meals 2 or 3 times a day, because otherwise they tend to get fat because they are not moving around enough because they're locked up. And if they're also being kept indoors, then they will need a litter box. The things that can go wrong with cats, for example, is behavioral stuff, where they can do things like they spray to mark their territory, which means they spray their urine against things. So sometimes it's against your furniture, sometimes it's against the curtains, sometimes it's up against the wall, and it smells pretty awful. And once they start doing it, that's it. They're going to carry on doing it. There's nothing you can do about it, at least not that I've ever found. And sometimes if they're stressed or even sick, they might start doing things like weeing on the bed, or pooing on the bed, or in strange places like that. So if you're not willing to deal with things like that, stay away from animals that do things like that, especially when they do it when they're stressed out or sick or depressed, because if you're not willing to handle it at the worst of their moments in life, then you won't be able to support them through the worst, and it's not fair to them for you to expect things to be great all the time. Things are not great all the time. Things are very often very difficult and very disgusting. So make sure you're willing to deal with that. Otherwise, spend as much time getting real experience as possible before making a commitment like bringing an animal into your home. Volunteer at a shelter. Spend time with friends or family who have a lot of animals. Get to know what it's like. Animals are messy and dirty and slobbery and, well, okay, dogs are, but each in their own way. You're going to be cleaning up after them, which means you're going to be cleaning up their poo and their wee and their vomit. And when they're sick, you need to make sure they get to the vet, especially if you don't have a lot of experience, because it's better to be safe than sorry. Sometimes what you think is nothing ends up being a life-threatening illness. And if you don't have the financial means to look after the animal when it gets sick, because chances are at least once it's going to happen, at least once, then it's not fair to them if you can't help them when they're sick, if you can't give them the treatment they need. So there are a lot of different things to consider. The bottom line, I would suggest do a lot of research and try and get as much hands-on practical experience as possible. And the point of research at the moment, because there's so much information all over the place and a lot of conflicting information, I tend to get a lot of different perspectives. So when I do research, I take everything in and I do my best to sift through it and take what makes the most sense to me, although that is within the context of my years of experience. So if you don't have that experience to give you the kind of context you might need in an environment where you're receiving a lot of conflicting information, then find someone who you can ask advice. Find someone who treats animals well, who you can see the animals are happy and healthy. Ask them for advice. But generally speaking, at least with dogs and cats, you just need to make sure they have food, water, they have a place to play and do their toilet business, and they get love and attention from you. Dogs typically tend to be more dependent on people, more emotionally dependent, and cats typically are more independent, though that is a generalization. Sometimes you get dogs that are completely independent and have absolutely no interest in what you are doing, and if they see you once a day, that's even, they don't, it makes no difference to them. Okay, so I hope that I have answered this question as much as possible within the 10-minute time frame. If you do have any points that you'd like me to expand on more, or any dimensions you see I missed, or if I didn't answer the question the way that, or cover the information that you would have wanted, then let me know. Please leave a comment or send a direct message. If you'd like to support me, you can do so on Patreon. The link is below. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.